Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Turning Point, a weekly discussion about a pivotal moment for individuals in the ag biological space, sponsored by TerraSim. I'm your host, Rhiannon Branch with Brownfield Ag News, and joining me today is Paul Schickler, who has worn many hats in the ag industry over the years. So, Paul, I'll let you start by telling us a bit about you and your current job.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Rhiannon. My current job is I'm retired, and I've been retired for 4 years, but once you're in agriculture, you sort of get that bug to stay in agriculture and stay committed and connected. So I am enjoying retirement, but also I have a consulting business, and in that consulting business, I have 6 clients that are for-profit, all in the startup community, all in agriculture technology. And then on the not-for-profit side, I work with 3 organizations. So the combination of those 2 activities on the for-profit side, as well as not-for-profit, keeps me busy.
I bet, and you've had a busy career ahead of that. So walk us through your ag background and job positions that you've held previously.
Okay, well, very good. First of all, ag background, I had none, and I had no ag education either. I attended Drake University, and before that, grew up in the Chicago area, so that sort of explains the non-ag background or non-ag experience. Attended Drake in Des Moines. Upon finishing Drake in 1974, I started immediately with Pioneer Hybrid International at that time. And that got me exposed to agriculture, got me exposed to the industry. I loved it. I learned a lot. In 1999, DuPont acquired Pioneer Hybrid International. So at that time, we became known as DuPont Pioneer. During my career, I primarily worked in finance and administrative roles up until that point where DuPont made that acquisition of Pioneer. But then in 1999, I assumed responsibility for international operations. So that's everything outside of the United States, but inclusive of research, production, sales, and all commercial activities. That was a great experience to do that for 8 years. And then in 2007, I was named president of DuPont Pioneer, retiring then in 2017.
Of all of that, Paul, what would you say was the most significant turning point for you in your ag career?
Well, that goes back to the time period that I was in international operations and looking after the businesses throughout the world. That really got me knowledgeable about agriculture, and more importantly, really connected to the research organization in Pioneer, the production organization in Pioneer, but then also customers, farmers, producers everywhere in the world, from Argentina to Zambia, to Croatia, to Vietnam, to China. I got to connect with growers around the world to understand their needs, their problems, and what a company like Pioneer, who's in plant genetics, could do to make them more successful. So that was a remarkable experience. And at that time, in 2007, the CEO of DuPont called me. The CEO was Chad Holliday. He called me and said, I'd like you to consider joining DuPont and leading Pioneer as president of DuPont Pioneer. And I had to really think about that because, now I'm 32 years in my career. I've just gone through 8 years of a great experience internationally, but one that also required tremendous time, travel, and commitment. And I wasn't burnt out, but I wasn't expecting to increase my commitment or activity and become president. So it took me some time to think through that, about whether or not I wanted to accept that great opportunity, but also knowing that it was going to come with additional time commitments and responsibility commitments. So to your point, the turning point was I sort of reflected back, and over the last, at that time, over the 10 years, Pioneer had made a couple of missteps or mistakes or poor decisions that really harmed the business. And in each of those cases, I, to put it bluntly, disagreed with each of those issues, each of those outcomes that resulted in Pioneer losing its competitiveness, losing its product performance, and really falling back from being the leader in the industry to sort of the next tier down. And just so that everyone is understanding what those issues were that I believe were missteps or mistakes were, number one, in the 1990s, we made the decision to make an adjustment to our direct sales agency system. And I think everyone would know that that was sort of the heart and blood of Pioneer, that direct sales model. We made changes. The changes weren't so bad, but it was implemented very poorly and resulted in tremendous relationship issues in the field, both in the communities where we worked, as well as with the sales reps and customers that we were serving. So that was number one. Number two, also at the same time, again, many listeners might remember Pioneer Hybrid 3394. It was a dominant product across the Northern Corn Belt. And because we were so successful there, we moved resources away from our research program in that geography. Well, after a few years, our product competitiveness in that area fell back. So that was another problem that really harmed the business. And then finally, in about 2002, we decided to not take a license to Roundup Ready corn. Another poor decision, I believe. And after having a great experience working with Dow to develop BT corn and introducing that to the market, and then having a similar positive relationship with Monsanto with Roundup Ready soybeans, we then, like I said, did not take a license to Roundup Ready corn. That put us behind in technology. It also put us behind with our product lineup as compared to others in the market. So I say all that because, here were three decisions that were made that harmed the business and really set us back for a decade or more. And I disagreed with those decisions. So now what can I do? I can walk away and, go into retirement, or I can sort of put my mouth where my money is and try and overcome those issues in the role of president. So basically, that's what I decided to do. I felt that we had a great opportunity to grow the business, to overcome those barriers that I just described, and really create a new business going forward. And so bottom line is, I accepted the president role for DuPont Pioneer. I'm glad I did, and that was my turning point.
Paul, I really appreciate that story and how you dive into the decisions that had to be made in order for that turning point to happen. And when I talk to folks about biologicals, I feel like I get a similar story of recalling a time or a turning point where they accepted this new technology. What would you say that turning point is for you when you began to accept biologicals?
Okay. And so that sort of moves me from then the time period that I accepted the presidency of Pioneer to my retirement. Now, during that period, I was president for 10 years, 2007 to 2017. And during that period, clearly, seed treatments became more and more important in production agriculture. Most companies were using seed treatments, and farmers were accepting seed treatments as sort of a standard product that can benefit their operation, the products, and productivity. So that was occurring. But at the same time, biologics were becoming part of that seed treatment recipe. So now I retire, And I did take a bit of a pause before getting into consulting and accepting clients that I would consult for. But one of the first companies that approached me was New Leaf Symbiotics. So it was at a time when I was looking to get into the consulting business. And here's New Leaf in the seed treatment business with a biological that has application for seed treatment. And when I looked at them, I first was impressed with the people in the business, their short history of developing products, but also when I dug deeper into the organization, I found that they were focused on a genre of biologics called methylotrophs. And the more I learned about methylotrophs, it was an intriguing space within the biological area because methylotrophs have a whole set of potential attributes. Clearly, they provide plant vigor and plant health. But in addition to that, what our research shows is that they also contribute to plant protectant. They also have the capability to improve the grain composition as an outcome. And then we're also finding some great benefits in the sustainability aspect or the environmental footprint. So when I looked at New Leaf and their library of strains around methylotrophs, it was a great opportunity not only to go after plant productivity, but also these other attributes that can really add value to the crop that is being produced. And again, sort of like this decision that I made when I accepted the presidency of Pioneer, when I looked at the biological profile of New Leaf, I saw, well, here's an opportunity to really try and make a difference between the hundreds and perhaps even thousands of seed treatments out there, many of which are biologicals. And some of them have a very bad name, a bad experience, and might even be characterized as snake oil salesmen. And so here was my chance to get into a company that I believe had a library of biologics that were really game-changing for all the reasons that I mentioned. And so it was a way to move the image away from sort of the snake oil image into a product that really contributes not only productivity, but also value to farmers and growers in the United States.
Paul, can you talk to us a little bit about, your journey with biologicals and over time, what kind of advancements that you've seen in this space?
Well, and that sort of gets right at what I was saying, because when I first joined as a consultant with New Leaf, their profile or portfolio of biologics was mainly oriented around plant productivity, plant health, and plant vigor. Very exciting, the work that they were doing in corn and soy. Also, it translates very well into other crops like tomato and peanuts. And we're also seeing great success into a crop that might be next in the horizon, and that's rice. So that was intriguing by itself because, like I said, there were many seed treatments out there and there were many biologics out there, but it clearly seemed that New Leaf had a strain of biologics that delivered vigor and health. But then the longer that I was with them, the more additional attributes came along. The ones that I named, contributing to plant protectant. So you didn't need to provide an insecticide or a herbicide, having environmental benefits. So the whole array of these additional attributes really then enabled biologics to step into the space of looking at an alternative, a replacement, or an additional mode of action from synthetic chemistry into the biologic space. It's maybe a complementary to synthetic chemistry, or maybe even a replacement for it. So that's really what drove me even further to be committed into biologics. It's that um, value add or even replacement to synthetic chemistry.
Very good, Paul. I think you've kind of already answered this question, but do you feel like biologicals themselves are a turning point in the entire ag industry? I know previously I've heard you talk about mentioning kind of this third era in agriculture and how biologicals are a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. And, it's interesting that you're bringing up the three eras. I'm sure other people talk about it, but I do. And one thing to remember, I think, is that advanced production agriculture in the United States is only 100 years old. So when you look at that 100 years, I really do break it down into three eras. And the first is improving plant performance. And that came through improved varieties, hybridization, and then also at that same time was mechanization. So we had a combination of things in the 1920s, improving seeds through varietal improvement and hybridization and mechanization. So that's the first era. Then the second era came along really in the 1990s, where we brought science. That's information technology science, biotechnology science, other enabling technologies. Even CRISPR-Cas is in that category that I would describe as the second era of bringing science to improve production agriculture. But now here, I believe, we are stepping into a third era, and that is bringing improved value to the production of crops. We've been focused over this 100 years that I've been describing on improving the productivity, or in other words, the volume of production that we produce. I think we're in an era now of trying to improve the value of the crop. And that can be done through a number of mechanisms. You can add nutritional attributes to the crop, or environmental attributes to the crop, so that we can make progress in climate change. And in that area that I'm just describing, the environmental aspects, improving the value of the crop, many people will either appreciate or in fact pay for a better environmental footprint because of the focus on climate change. And biologics clearly can deliver that better environmental footprint.
So we'll call you an early adopter on biologicals, Paul. For those who haven't quite reached that turning point yet, they're not sold, or they don't know enough, about them to kind of make that decision. What would you tell farmers or other people in the ag industry that are kind of on the fence there?
Right. I think you look at research, and you do that not only by looking at the research that the company provides, the developer of the technology or the biologic. You need to look at that research, but in addition, you need to look at third-party research. And that could be universities, that could be USDA studies, that could be third parties who do research trial and data collection as their business and then publish that. But it is independent and third party. Or you could even look at multinationals like Corteva, Bayer, Syngenta, because they are going to also put whatever they may use, whether it's a biological product or another seed treatment product, they're going to put those products through a tremendous amount of rigor before they adopt them in their product lineup. So whether it's USDA, public universities, third-party research organizations, or organizations that are going to put a biological product in their portfolio, you need to look at that third-party independent research so that you can be assured of what the promises or expectations that are being proposed are in fact supported by science, data, and research.
Definitely. So, Paul, even now in retirement, you're kind of out in the fields. You're still out talking to people. What are you kind of hearing and seeing in terms of this biological space from others in the industry?
Well, what I hear, whether it's with farmers, whether it's with ag companies, whether it's in general industry trends, or even the majors in agriculture, what I hear is that we're looking for more value. And I just mentioned that a moment ago, that one of the components of value could very well be a softer, a safer environmental footprint as we combat climate change. But there's a whole host of other ways to deliver value. And by value, I mean value that the consumer or the end user is going to pay for. And because the consumer or the end user is going to pay for it, the farmer will get a share, because that's what's key and critical to this next era of agriculture, is delivering more value to the consumer or the end user, and the farmer capturing some of that value. Now, like I said, that can be done in a whole host of ways. The environmental footprint, climate change, capturing carbon is one way to do that. But let's think about the consumer and what a consumer might think or how they might act. And I sort of put this in the category of who, what, where, and how. So who? The consumer often looks at who produces the food. Is it a local farmer? Is it a family farmer? So that's one potential value creator at the consumer level. Who produces the food? How it's produced. Is it produced according to conventional practices? Is it produced organically? Is it produced under some environmental certification process? There's another way to capture value, because the consumer wants to know how their food is produced. Where is it produced? Is it local, within 50 miles, 100 miles? Is it associated with a fair trade organization, so that farmers get paid a fair value for what they're producing? So that where of being produced is also potentially valuable to the consumer. And then finally, the what, and that basically is what's inside of it. Does it have nutritional or health benefit, or does it taste better, or is it a higher quality product? So the what is also very important. So, I'm making this a little long, but I think this is important because there's so much opportunity, not only for farmers, but for those companies in agriculture technology to look at consumers and the end user and think through who, what, where, and how can you meet some of those demands. And if you do that successfully, you'll get the consumer and the end user will pay for it, and you can deliver value back to the farmer. And clearly, the farmer needs it. I've been in production agriculture 40 years, and we go through peaks and valleys when things are good and when things are very bad. But on average, farmers are operating at a break-even point. So we need to deliver more value to the farmer.
You said it was long, but you took me back through my journalism classes there, the who, what, when, where, why. Right. And that's definitely, that's a good way to look at this and several other things along those lines. And I know you've mentioned, we've been pretty forward looking here, but I want to ask this question in case there's more, insight that you might have. What do you see for the future of biologicals, or what would you like to see for the future of biologicals, whether that be, for you and the farmers you help serve, or for the industry as a whole?
I think the environmental opportunity is fabulous. To have as an alternative to synthetic chemistry and get the same results, but doing it through biologics. And I'm seeing some great opportunities, even in the carbon capture or carbon sequestration area, where biologics and the practices that a farmer can use as they use a biological product can really make some strong inroads into that tremendous global issue that we face in capturing carbon. I think that is a great opportunity. We're it's not even appropriate to say that we're at the early stage. We're at the infantile, or we're so early in this that we don't know what we don't know. But I am convinced that the biological space offers great opportunity as we make progress against the climate changes that we have.
I've thrown a lot at you, Paul. Is there anything else you want to add to the discussion that I haven't had an opportunity to ask you about?
Well, I mentioned a couple of the, you might say, passions or trends that I'm seeing. One around the value component driven by consumer and user trends. And if we can deliver that value to the farmer, then that makes farmer economics better. But the bigger picture here is, if all that happens, and I'm convinced, like I said, that this third era will drive that to happen. If that does happen, that is going to be a great outcome for rural communities throughout the United States and throughout the world that, for the most part, are struggling. They're struggling with rural to urban migration. They're struggling with the loss of education access, healthcare access, legal access. They struggle with things that you and I take for granted, like internet access. So rural communities are struggling, and I'm convinced that this next era, by focusing upon science and technology and having the startup community deliver these solutions that provide value, that can have a symbiotic relationship in helping rural communities grow, thrive, and have a bright future.
Very good. Well, Paul, I certainly appreciate your time today and that wonderful insight on, your turning points and what to look forward to in this exciting biological space. That wraps up our third episode then of Turning Point, and we want to thank TerraSim for sponsoring this. To learn more about the work that Paul is doing, everyone can check out the Third Ag website, and that's www.3-ag.com. To learn more about New Leaf and TerraSim, you can visit www.terrasim2022.com. This video will also be available on demand on the Brownfield website, brownfieldagnews.com. So thank you all for joining us, and you can tune in next Thursday at noon for the next episode of Turning Point. See you all then.